Right, so news broke on Wednesday, and it was made official via a press conference yesterday, Thursday, obviously, that Josh Warrington has re-signed with Matchroom and Eddie Hearn. Firstly, that came as a bit of a surprise because if you kind of just cast your minds back just a couple of weeks, months even, there was a lot of talk with Frank Warren, Josh Warrington, and Shakur Stevenson himself about them two trying to, make a fight happen. So because of that, I just assumed that there was still a deal in place between Frank Warren and Josh Warrington. Obviously, that deal has expired, and Josh Warrington has made the move. And during the press conference and interviews, he basically said the reason he jumped ship is because he's looking for big unification fights, and he thinks Eddie Hearn's the man with enough clout to secure him the fights that he wants. So with that being said, Frank Warren, I was under the impression that there's supposed to be some form of an alliance between Top Rank and Queensberry, the way that Carl Frampton just moved over, and obviously the first one to do it, Tyson Fury, moved over to Top Rank. It doesn't seem to be the case, because if there's an alliance and allegiance between the two, they're both champions. I'm talking about Shakur Stevenson and Josh Warrington. You would assume that it would be an easy fight to make between the two of them. But you shouldn't assume, because it makes an arse out of you and me. The same way I assumed there was still time on the deal between Frank Warren and Josh Stevenson. That's just the two names merged. Josh Warrington. I fear for Frank Warren a little bit now, because if you look at what his stable looked like when he first signed with BT, Tyson Fury, Josh Warrington, Billy Joe Saunders, Carl Frampton, it looked like he was building a stable that could challenge Eddie Hearn's superiority in the UK. It was around the same time when Eddie Hearn was kind of expanding out in the States with this DAZN deal, and there was a lot of talk about how Eddie Hearn, all his best UK fighters are now fighting in the States. We're not getting the same level of show over here in the UK. And it felt like there was potential for Frank Warren to exploit Eddie Hearn, maybe spreading himself too thin, and Frank Warren using all of the talent that he had acquired to really put on shows that could rival the I wouldn't necessarily say quality that Eddie Hearn was putting on, but just the name value that Eddie Hearn was putting on in his shows in the UK. He was building a stable that had a similar level of names in that stable. Now when you look at what Frank Warren actually has, I said in a video earlier this week about Daniel Dubois that Daniel Dubois and Anthony Yarde were his kind of two big names. I had forgot about Josh Warrington at that time, but Josh Warrington was Frank Warren's real only ticket seller. It was the only guy that Frank Warren had in his stable that could sell out an arena off the back of his own name. Like, I don't know what the ticket sales between Daniel Dubois and Joe Joyce, I don't know what the ticket sales for that show are like at the moment. I did have a look earlier this week, and I did notice that a large portion of the O2 Arena that hadn't been opened up yet for ticket sales. And that's like alarm bells for me a little bit, because this is a fight that's going on pay-per-view. So surely if it's a pay-per-view fight, it's a fight that in theory should have enough gravitas to sell 20,000 tickets in the O2 Arena. The pricing as well, I had a quick look at, and it wasn't at the same level as what Eddie Hearn prices his shows at, and that's not me moaning or complaining. That's definitely a good thing for us, the fan, the consumer. But when your tickets are cheaper and you still aren't able to open up the whole of the arena, I don't know, man. It doesn't look good for that particular fight. At this stage anyway, and obviously they're still a couple of months away, so things can change in that time, and hopefully they do sell it out, and hopefully there's a crazy atmosphere in there, because that fight deserves it. But going more back to Frank Warren himself, he said in an interview with Seconds Out that he wasn't interested in a rematch between Kid Galahad and Josh Warrington, because the first one stunk the place out, he said, and he kind of cited that as a reason as to why he didn't re-sign Josh Warrington. I don't for a second believe it was Frank Warren's decision not to sign Josh Warrington. I 100% believe he wanted to re-sign Josh Warrington, and it was Josh Warrington's decision to leave Frank Warren. People have been saying that Frank Warren is now kind of at a Mick Hennessy levels, and I don't buy that for a second. I still believe Frank Warren has the infrastructure in place, and he has a stable of fighters that he can cultivate and turn into stars, etc. But I kind of feel like Frank Warren is a little bit behind the times, and he needs to, if he's not going to do it himself, he needs to get the people around him that understand how this new digital generation work, understand how important it is to put out content on social media platforms around fighters that are up and coming, to make us, the fans and consumer, aware of his up and coming talent, and understand the stories behind these guys. Because look, I don't consider myself a hardcore boxing fan. It's very rare for me to sit down and watch a UK boxing show from start to finish, generally because the undercards aren't the strongest compared to my main favourite combat sport, MMA, where you generally get a card full of names that you're aware of, and you get meaningful fights from bottom to top, basically. You don't really get that in boxing, and that's just the way boxing is. But at the same time, there's a reason why I was invested when Fitzgerald fought Anthony Fowler, for example. That was for a British title. There's a reason why I was aware of them too, because Matchroom do a good job of putting out the content. Sky Sports do a good job of supporting these fights and putting out content around fights like this. I don't at this point see the investment, and I'm not talking about from a money standpoint. Obviously it does cost money, but just a content standpoint from BT, their YouTube channel is quite good, but on the actual TV channel, I don't really see enough of these young up and coming talents being talked about. And in order for Frank Warren to maintain the power, or grow the power that he has currently, or just improve his current position in the grand scheme of things, you need to have a stable of fighters where fans are invested in those fighters and those fighters' journeys. I'm invested in Anthony Yarde's journey, and that's because of his manager, Tunde Ajayi, his trainer, manager, himself, the way he carries himself in interviews and things like that. And if a fighter doesn't necessarily have the ability to tell a compelling story on camera himself, the job of the promoter is to help that fighter do that. So if you're not going to get it from an IFL interview or a Boxing Social interview, you need to get it from somewhere else. I feel like Sky Sports and Matchroom do a decent enough job of that, and I'm not sure whether BT have the infrastructure in place to do that. They do it really well for big fights, which is the funny thing, because when it comes to a Tyson Fury against Wilder, I think BT do a better job than Sky in terms of the content they put out, etc. on the YouTube platform. But they need to start doing it at a lower level, because if they've got this long-term deal with Frank Warren, they need to start working together to start building these fighters, not just in the ring but outside the ring as well. That was one of my concerns about this Dubois-Joe Joyce fight. I don't feel like they've done a good enough job of building both of these guys outside of the ring. Frank Warren might be really good at picking the right fights for his fighters at the right time to help them develop and grow and get the right level of experience that they're required to have to get to that next level inside the ring. But there comes a point where you have to understand this is as close to show business as a sport can get, combat sport. Like your kind of the interest your fight generates usually comes from the story behind the fight. not just these guys are fighting for a title and this title is really important. Does that make sense? So when you watch the World Cup final, you're not thinking about, oh, France played these guys first and then they played them guys next, and Croatia played these guys first and they played them guys next, and these two guys don't really like each other. You're watching it because it's for the World Cup. It's an important game. When it comes to boxing, how many title fights are there that you're watching? Not necessarily because these two guys are really good fighters, or these two guys are fighting for this title and this title is really important. It's the fights that really grab the casual kind of market are the fights where there's a story, there's a little bit of a push and pull. Like Carl Froch against George Groves is a prime example. These were two British guys who had an amazing kind of build up to the first fight. The first fight went the way it did, and that formed the foundation to a huge fight at Wembley Stadium, the first time it happened in this modern era of boxing. And that wasn't because it was for the world title, it was because it was Carl Froch and George Groves who hated each other. So the point I suppose I'm making is, when it comes to Frank Warren, he's in a tough spot at the moment. They can turn it around, but they need to start investing in their fighters and start telling those stories. And they need to get someone that knows how to use social media to its best effect and put out the right content and put out kind of behind the scenes footage, etc. And slowly but surely that will grow. And as it grows, people will start becoming more familiar with the stable of Frank Warren, because right now I could probably name about 5 fighters that he's got. And that's never been the case when it comes to Frank Warren. Anyway, that was a bit of a long rant, and I went here, there and everywhere, and I don't really know if I really made a valid a valid point in all of that. But take it for what it's worth. I'll catch you guys next time.